But one step we're going to want to do before that is, assuming you did a default installation of SQL, a couple things we're going to want to change. So I've already installed SQL Server on this machine, and I'm going to go ahead and open up the SQL Server Management Studio. I'm going to log in with Windows Authentication. And one change we need to make is we're going to go into the SQL Server itself, go to Properties, and under Security, by default, AlarmTraq installed, or SQL Server installed with a Windows Authentication mode only. We want to change that to SQL Server and Windows Authentication mode, or mixed mode as they call it. Reason being is AlarmTraq will be installed as a service, and the service profile by default will not have any Windows login. So, like it's telling us, some of the configuration changes will not take effect until SQL Server is restarted. So we will restart SQL in a little bit. I'll click OK. But one other option we're going to want to do is under Security and Logins. We have the SA login. Now you can create your own SQL login to use with AlarmTraq, but I'm going to go ahead and use the System Administrators. So I'm going to go to Properties. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a password that I know. In this case, I'm just going to make it AlarmTraq. 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 And I'm going to uncheck the enforced password policy, just so it doesn't force me to make a stronger password. That works for me. Now I'm going to go down here to Status. As we can see, login is disabled because it wasn't used before we switched the system to mixed mode. I'll click that as, I'll click OK. And then one other step we need to take is we're going to install or run a SQL script which will install the database for us. So I'm just going to go up here and I'm going to click on File, Open, File. Now I'm going to get myself to the AlarmTraq folder that was just installed. So I'll go to My Computer, C drive. Because AlarmTraq is a 32-bit application, it was installed under the Program Files x86 folder. AlarmTraq. Under AlarmTraq, I have the Tools folder. As we can see, we have three script files in this folder. The Create AlarmTraq is the one I'm concerned with. Because I'm not using SQL Express here, we're using a full-blown SQL Server. I'm going to select the Create AlarmTraq 7.3 SQL 2008 R2 MS SQL Server script. We're going to open up that script. Now, by default, you'll see here the path settings. This is typical for a fresh default installation. However, this path may be slightly different. So if we bomb out when we go to run this script, that's more than likely the first place you'll need to look. We can actually just confirm that easy enough just by scrolling down and going to looking at My Computer, C drive, Program Files, SQL Server, and there it is. There's the name of my SQL Server right there. And in that case, it does match. So we can go ahead and run this script. I'm going to go ahead and click Execute. And as we can see down here, it's executing the query. Now this could take several minutes, usually about 2 minutes to run, so I'm going to pause until we're completed. Okay, the command successfully completed. As we can see, the query executed successfully. In this case, it took 2 minutes and 2 seconds to create the new AlarmTraq database. Now, in order to see that, I'm going to go up here and I'm just going to right click here and go to refresh. And now if I open up databases, we'll see that the AlarmTraq database has been created. All the tables appear to be there, as well as stored procedures and miscellaneous functions. So I think we're ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and close up the SQL Server Management Studio. Now, one step, if you recall earlier, it said that we needed to restart the service for the mixed mode authentication to take effect. So I'm going to go to Programs, SQL Server 2008, Configuration Tools, and SQL Server Configuration Manager. All I really need to do is select my SQL Server service. I'm just going to tell it I'm going to restart. All right, we're complete. So now we can go ahead and attempt to start AlarmTraq. First thing that pops up is it wants to know the SQL connection. By default, it's going to use the local machine. So if you're using SQL Server Express, it should match nicely. But we are going to want to use SQL Server authentication. If you remember, we used the SA username and password, AlarmTraq. We entered this earlier. Let's give it a test. Okay, test completed successfully. So I'll go ahead and click OK. Now AlarmTraq wants to know if we're upgrading from a previous version of AlarmTraq that uses an access database, such as version 5.3 or below. In this case, fresh installation, we're just going to say no. And I'm going to go ahead and start it up again. It sees the database. And now what it's doing is updating the Nortel maintenance objects and AVAYA maintenance objects in its database. Got quite a few going on here, so I'm going to go ahead and pause this. It'll probably take a couple minutes. It's just about done adding all the maintenance objects. And AlarmTraq came up. And as we can see, the database does contain a single alarm that it created on startup called AlarmTraq Test and added the appropriate site profile into the database. Now, one of the first